Hello everybody, welcome back to another Flight Simulator 2004 video here on the channel. Today we're going to be running through my settings in my simulator, how I'm able to achieve the level of accuracy and detail that I do. And it's just settings inside and outside the sim. I have a different file structure that takes a little bit more work getting used to, but it really helps clear up the sim and just make it an all-around smoother experience for most airports. Not all, but most. Let's go ahead and get started.
Minimums.
Alrighty, starting off, we are here in the default Flight Simulator 2004 folder of mine. I have two installs, and this is the one with all my add-ons and tweaks and configuration files and everything. I have a second one, which is bare bones, default FS9, one add-on airplane installed. That's just for testing. So in here, we have a different file structure. You have your add-on scenery folder here. You have your scenery and texture folder. But besides a couple of these little small stuff here, everything is in actual separate folders. So this right here allows the Flight Simulator to not have to go through so many files to find your actual scenery. So we'll run through that real quickly and what I do. So we'll drag that folder over to the one side, and then we have our scenery config files here. So I have my airports spread into categories. I have North America, South America, Middle East, Europe, and backcountry and Asia. Now, I haven't gone around backcountry yet because I now have X-Plane 11, so all my little backcountry GA flying and practice and stuff is done through X-Plane now. But the big ones I use are North America and Europe. So the file structure is simple. I have one scenery config here, which has all of my North American add-ons. And over in here, I just copy this scenery config to replace that one. And then I have one big folder. And this is what my file structure looks like. So it's the exact same for Europe. So if I wanted to go to Europe, I would copy over my scenery config, replace this scenery config down here, and then just click and drag Europe over, and then I can load it up. So I can do that real quick. Control-C, Control-V, replace it. Now if I load up the scenery config editor, which is a really helpful tool, I recommend getting it, you have here all your airport add-ons. Now, the number one thing you want to do, we're doing that, and I don't need these two anymore. Number one thing you want to do is only use the add-ons you're flying. So I just bought Mega Airport Heathrow. It's on sale. It was on sale right now for 25% off, so I picked it up. And that one is one of the few airports, like I'd said before. It's one of the few that this trick doesn't really work with, but the rest of them I've noticed a really good frame rate increase. So, say I was going to fly from, let's pick two. Let's fly from Cologne to, example, of Vienna. I would click those, save, and that's it. Those are the only two airports I'm going to have. None others. Or no other airports installed, because even though they're in there, they're not actual scenery areas. So you don't have the sim doesn't have to go through and load all them. They only need these parts. So that actually makes it a lot easier. So we're going to exit this and just save and quit. Now to open up and get North America running. Let's see here. There it is. I would go up here, and in Europe I have my file structure. I would drag this over, and then I would go to North America, and I would drag that over. Control-C, Control-V. Pop that in, and then in my North America folder, you can see my file structure, all of my add-ons, and then FS Dream Team add-ons. I picked them all up at Black Friday sale. And then Imagine Sim add-ons and other stuff like that. Once you got that installed, open up your senior config editor. Forgot to copy that over. Control-C, Control-V. Now when you run this, why is it not working? New scenery config. Why does it go to new scenery config? I need it on just normal. Where's the N? There it is. Get rid of that. There it is. All my North American sceneries are in. So, again, if I wanted to fly from Anchorage, just pop those suckers in, and say Anchorage to Honolulu. Click those three, file, save, and then exit. And then I would load up AES, and it would say, these airports are not installed, or like not active. Would you like to disable them? It's like, yes, 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 click on yes to all, and then just enable those 2 airports, and AES will work just fine. Alright, the second part of the external part of the FS9 can be found in your FS9 config. So, what you're going to need in here is a couple of the values I use for my FS9. It would be, where is it? LOD target FPS, 30. So what this does is it allows your flight simulator to render more objects until it hits 30 frames per second. Once it hits 30, it will stop rendering extra objects and actually start taking away to maintain this base number. So my system itself can handle 30 and not take away anything and start reducing quality, because my sim usually handles around 55 to 60 FPS. So I have a very good render distance. It's pretty much the max render distance, and the objects and clarity is going to remain higher. So that's what that does. Next up, we have the mipmap bias is 6. 6 is fine for me. Some people use 5. There's a 4. That's going to be the internal, so I'll show you that in a bit. And then what we need here is the bandwidth mult equals 120. You don't want to go any higher. You can go lower, but don't go higher. Some people have said use 240. I've just noticed a decrease. So 120 is good. If you want runway lights, you can find this tweak online. This will just it adjusts the size of your lights for the runways and stuff like that. The big part is here in the terrain. So this is the like really, really important part. So you're going to have an area factor of 100. The min area is going to be 10, and the max, or the other min area is also going to be 100 as well. Your max vertex level to get the very high quality terrain. If you have anything better than I think it's 72 meter mesh, I have 19 meter. You're going to want this set to 21. I'm using FS Global 2010 mesh. It was quite pricey, but it's worth it. Because I just decided to pay for it for the convenience rather than having to go online and search for a mesh every time I wanted to fly somewhere. And it just got to be the point. US had good mesh, nowhere else didn't. So I just got FS Global. It's global 19 and 38 meter mesh. Works really, really well. Set that to 21. Your texture size, that'll be in the sim. Your autogen density and stuff like that's in the sim. Your gradients and stuff are in the sim. This part here is what you want to choose also. 9.5 on the default radius, 9.0 on the extended, and terrain extended levels of 4. You want to have those. And that's about all for the FS9 config. Alright, for the third part of the flight simulator here, my settings, we're going to go into the settings tab. And I'm using some skin. This is not the default skin, so as you would know. But that doesn't matter. So in the settings we have general, and you can pause the video if you want to look at these. I'm going to spend most of my time in the actual scenery and display. So I will just keep my mouth shut, and I will just go through these, and you can pause and copy them if you like. One thing with the PMDG MD-11, Ifly 737, or PMDG 747, and many of the other actual aircraft, this is the recommended settings. So if you are flying airliners, this is what they recommend. Do not change this. I know if you do have the Ifly, this has to be in the US system. But the rest of this actually stays with you. You don't want to change your longitude or latitude. Whatever your country is set in, that's what you want to keep it as. Traffic settings are personal preference. I keep mine off just for extra frame rates, and because I don't use, if I do fly offline, it's without ATC, so I don't want to have to go get told to go around because some of my aircraft is yeah, it's just a mess. The default air traffic, traffic in the sim is terrible. I've had airplanes within a couple 100 feet of each other trying to land on the same runway, and one goes around and runs through the other, and it's just a mess. So I keep that off. Ignore crashes is used because some airports have random buildings that are hidden because the thing, and they're there, so I don't want to crash in that, so I keep that off. Third and final, the main part we're going to be looking at here is the display settings. So what we're going to be looking at is my settings and what they would do in the sim. So terrain mesh complexity, this is just how complex your terrain is going to be, and that was in the settings, or in the FS9 config, so that right there is set to 100. Terrain size is set to high, so that's 4.7 meters per pixel, and that's what that does. Terrain details, land only. If I was going like that, the water effects would go to low. So I have that. Dawn dust texture blending, that's just going to blend your dawn dust textures into your daytime and nighttime textures, and it makes it a lot smoother. Extended terrain, that is what it adds. That's what, if you want those far away textures, that's what that adds there. Special effects detail, so exactly what it says, smoke, dust, waves, visual quality. Then we have scenery complexity, set to extremely dense. Autogen density is extremely dense. Add-on dynamic scenery is, I don't know what it does, but if third-party scenery supposedly has it, that's set to extremely dense. Ground scenery cast shadows. This one here is a big one. If you start to see actual performance decreases and you have this enabled, first thing it's going to go, uncheck that. You don't need it. It's visual. That's all. Sun glare is off because you don't really need it. Lens flare, the one setting I have, my default lens flare, the lens flare takes over the sun glare for me, so that's what that does. In the aircraft, everything is set to maxed out. Ultra high is basically what it is. If you want reflections on your airplanes to make it nice and shiny and pretty and all that, that's what that does. Aircraft cast shadows, it puts a shadow on itself, or puts a shadow of itself on the ground. Landing lights, so those are on. Virtual quality, cockpit quality gauge, you want that all the way maxed or else you won't be able to read a thing. Weather, this is another big one. If you have a low system, keep this at 40 or keep this at 30 actually. You don't need that all the way up. I can have it all the way up, so I can leave it there. Now depending, I will bring it down to 60 because my max view distance is 50 anyway, so I can do that. But 80 is fine. And then you don't want to use simple clouds. Those are 2D pancakes. You want to use the detailed clouds. And if you're also having a hard time with actual performance, bring that down to medium or high. That's just the number of cloud puffs, as X-Plane calls it. Then in the hardware, we have our frame rate. That is going to be set to unlimited. Don't limit the frame rate in the sim. It's just a bad idea. Next up, you have your actual resolution. My resolution is set to 1920 by 1080. That is my monitor right there. This was my old monitor, the 1366 by 768, but I'm a 1080p simmer now, so it just brings in clarity. Anti-aliasing is off, transform and lighting is on. That's just lighting effects, essentially. Render to texture, that's also just lighting effects, and just actual just how many textures are just going to be rendered on the exact same object. Filtering, keep that at trilinear. Another big one here is MIP mapping. My computer can handle 6. Some can only handle 4 or 3 or 5. Most people cannot go up to 7 or 8, if any. That's just going to introduce a lot of flickering and weird artifacts. So keep that at the level that will give you a nice quality without all that shimmering. So 5 and 6 work for me. Hardware rendered lights, keep that at 8 unless you have a hard time on your frames. Play around with that. That's just how shiny, like how many lights are going to be on the airplane shine almost. And then global texture size. This one's the big kicker. You want to keep this at massive unless you have to decrease it. So those are pretty much my settings. One more thing is the Nvidia control panel, and that's where all my anti-aliasing comes from. And I'll show you that now. Alright, so real quick correction, I had said it was in the Nvidia control panel. We're actually using the Nvidia profile inspector, or it's part of the Nvidia inspector. So you're going to load up the profile for Flight Simulator 2004. It's listed under Microsoft. First up, what you're going to do is you're going to set the anti-aliasing compatibility to Diablo 3, and SLI compatibility bits to Talos Principle, and FIFA 13. Next up, in the Sync and Refresh tab, you're going to go maximum pre-rendered frames equals 1. This loads the next frame that's going to be played onto your processor, and it makes the experience smoother. Next up, if you have tearing or notice any tearing in the simulator, you're going to want to turn vertical sync on, and that'll get rid of any of that, but it could cause skipping frames, so you're going to want to add triple buffering, and that'll get rid of that for you. AFR behavior for this VSync is going to be on, and tear control is standard. Next up, anti-aliasing behavior flags, turn that to none. Anti-aliasing mode is override any application setting. This means that FS2004 will be overridden by Profile Inspector. I set this to 8 times multi-sampling because for some reason FS9 will crash if I set it to any other setting other than multi-sampling. I used to use 16xq, but I can't use that anymore. 8x works fine with 1080p though. Transparency supersampling sets to 4 times sparse grid supersampling. You do not need this, but it really makes the sim look nice, and it adds a little bit more clarity. However, if you notice frame rate drops, this is the first thing to go. Flip that back. And then FXA, I have that on. Next up, antitropic filtering is going to be user-defined or off. And I set that to 16 times. Texture filtering is high quality, and power management mode is prefer maximum performance. Also note Google. You're going to want to make sure your computer is running at maximum performance and not balanced. If it's running unbalanced, you're not going to get all the power the sim would like, and it's going to make it a little bit harder. So definitely make sure to get maximum performance on in your computer. Alrighty, so the fourth and final part of FS2004, enhancing the sim, and my settings, is going to be shaders, or SweetFX. So you can find this once you download it, you can get off Google, one of the websites, you can put the config.exe in your FS9 folder, just the main one, when you run it as an administrator. This is just to make sure it works. So you're going to come up with this folder. And mine is actually very simple. So I have dither, and I have that set to 1. Curves, I have 2. Curves and contrast is 0.6. And curves formula is 6. Next in vibrance, I have that set to 0.10. And then RGB is 1, 0, and 1. And I turn the greens back a little bit. Next up in levels, I have my black point set to 0 and white set to 240. And that is all for SweetFX, but it makes a world of difference. So if I go into split screen, and I save view config, and I load that up, there is the difference. that's all I have for you guys today. If this video helped you, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions, comment below, and I'll try and help you out. This video is mainly just to show you my settings, and if you want to replicate them yourself, feel free to do so. However, back up any files you do change, and make sure you remember your old settings so you can revert back if need be. My recommendation is to back up your FS9 config, because that's where most of the changes will take place. Till then, see you next time.